more like a 4-footer. In heavy shade, they thin out considerably. This is at about half shade, and that's probably where they're the happiest. They don't like too much more, not a little more than, they can take a little more than half shade, but they've got this beautiful flowers in the spring. They've got decent looking black fruit that shows actually pretty well, and the birds will take it in the winter. And then good to great fall color. This fall color is not unusual at all. So for a medium-sized shrub that takes some shade, that's a good one there. But getting back big again, this is almost more tree-like, sort of the same size as bottlebush buckeye, but fringe tree or Cyananthus. That's a big one. That'll get, again, 10, 12, even 15 foot tall. Late spring flowering of these huge white feathery panicles. It's also been called old man's beard because of that look to it. Keep in mind that there are both male and female versions of Cyananthus. You're only going to get the fruit on the females, and the birds take the fruit quite readily. So, but they don't usually sex them when you get them. You don't usually know what you're going to get till you start growing it. So if you want to make sure to get a female, if you want to make sure to get a female one, you have to buy something that's in fruit. They will tend to pollinate themselves to a certain extent, I've noticed. And then here's fringe tree again, another one, good fall color on it. You can see the fruit on this female hanging. Southern bush honeysuckle, Dirvillia sessifolia, not related to regular honeysuckle, who I'm not a big fan of. Southern bush honeysuckle, though, will take shade like nobody's business. It's more of a ground cover to a certain extent with northern bush honeysuckle. Southern bush sessifolia, especially the variety called butterflies, is more shrubby, more upright, less ground covery. Yellow flowers, late spring. But some of the stuff I actually really like is this one called Cool Splash. Really intense variegation on it. Strong variegation. The trouble with it, it just doesn't have quite as much vigor as we'd like to see, probably because of that nice, strong white variegation on it. It's a little slow to grow. I like it a lot, especially in a shady area, because it really pops with that color, that green and white. However, it's quite slow to grow, and it takes a long time to size up. That'd be my only problem with it. Otherwise, I like it very, very much. And here we have it at the gardens. Again, 3 or 4 of them. Notice that because it's a darker spot, that variegation is very, very tough, very, very strong variegation. It just pops. Nice stuff. And again, showing though how small they are. It takes a while for these guys to size up. Now, I have not personally grown this, but I've seen it in the garden centers. It's been out for about 5 years. There's some Dirvillia. There's one called Kodiak Black, sort of a purplish leaf. And then Kodiak Orange, both with yellow flowers, both with shade tolerance. And I'm sort of excited by these. I haven't grown them yet. I think they're going to be a pretty easy plant to grow, probably about a 3 to 4 footer, I'm guessing, in size as they size up. Dogwoods, the red twig dogwood does hold up pretty good in shade. In the past, I haven't always been happy with red twigs. A lot of them have problems with leaf spot diseases, and especially the gold leaf varieties are so showy, but a lot of the variegateds and the gold leaf varieties tend to have problems with leaf spot. And that can be a real problem. Midsummer leaf spot, septorial leaf spot can disfigure them. So the second half of the year, they look like junk. This first edition's Neon Burst, it's a new one out of Bailey, seems to hold up really, really well. It's probably my favorite of the gold foliage red twig dogwoods. But any red twig dogwood would work in this situation. This is a good new one though. Arctic Fire is another newer one with a red twig, another good red twig dogwood. Again, very, very good disease resistance and very good red stems. The stems are redder than a lot of other varieties. So Arctic Fire is another good newer one. Neither one of these get real huge. I'm thinking 4 to 5 footers. Okay, not necessarily red dogwood, but gray dogwood. Cornus racemosa is like red twig, is native to Milwaukee County. And actually, my friend Mike Yanni selected this particular variety called Irish Setter, selected it from southern Milwaukee County. So it's it's what we might call a native cultivar. We know it's native. It originally was native to right around here. We know it's going to grow well around here. They tend to, the problems with most gray dogwood is leaf spot, that septoria leaf spot. This variety called Irish setter tends to be quite clean in leaf. And again, it's a red twig dogwoods are another multi-season crop. You get nice, you get the flowers in the spring. You get white, you get the nice red fall color. Here it is. This is the one from my old yard in Janesville, Wisconsin, underneath one of the biggest box elders you ever saw in my life. So it's in total shade all the time. And here we go. It's nothing fancy, but it's got pretty respectable fall color for a thing that's in perfect full shade all the time. Gray dogwood. Keep in mind, it's a big plant and it will sucker over time a little bit. Notice that I didn't water a whole lot in this one spot, so it didn't sucker much for me here. Stuff that stays well watered will tend to sucker more as it ages. It's not a little plant though. It'll go 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot tall over time. So you got to you have to have the right place to put it, but a great, great native plant. Okay, look at these pretty, pretty berries. We know what this one is. We know it. It's dwarf burning bush. Still legal in Wisconsin. Now it's not legal anymore to grow standard burning bush, the old-fashioned big burning bush, but the variety known as compacta is still legal to grow in Wisconsin. The reason that they outlawed the bigger ones is invasiveness. Birds take these seeds, they plant them all over. We're starting to see lots and lots and lots of burning bush pop up in our woods, and it's something we're trying to minimize in the future. So you can still buy compacta, but the trouble is compacta is still, compacta still sets a lot of fruit. I personally would not plant Euonymus Aleta compacta anymore, but I would put in this variety called Rudy Hague. Rudy Hague is much smaller than most other compact burning bush. Max, mature side, maybe 4 foot or less even. There's another one called Little Moses, which I love, that shrub on fire kind of look. It's a great name. But Little Moses and Rudy Hague are the two kinds of euonymus that do not set much fruit at all, and they'll be the least invasive plants to be putting in. This is a plant, by the way, that'll take more shade than just about anything else. This and hydrangea arborescens are probably my two of the best plants for real heavy shade. Fothergilla will take a lot of shade as well, and I particularly love this one called Blue Shadow. Other Fothergillas are okay too, but Blue Shadow really shows well. Now, something about this is rabbits just adore it. How come rabbits always know the more expensive plants? That's the ones they eat. Tree peonies, Fothergilla, those are the ones that cost more in the store, and those are the rabbits, the stuff that they eat the most often in my yard, at least. It's really an intense blue color. The thing is, though, like other Fothergilla, it has some of the best fall color. Oh, we're not going to see it. Some of the best fall color you've ever seen. This is a picture I took with my phone about 10 years ago, Blue Shadow. And it's got that blue glaucous waxy covering on the outside, but then just a riot of rainbows underneath it. Here's straight species, just dwarf Fothergilla. Nice white flowers in the spring, at least if you can keep them away from the rabbits. And then again, really nice red fall color. Doesn't size real fast, stays small, stays very well behaved. As long as you keep the rabbits away from it, it's a great plant. Here we go. Here's Beaver Creek variety. Again, great, great fall color. Okay, let's talk hydrangeas. This is going to be the biggest batch of plants I talk about this entire talk. Endless summer. If any of you have planted, I'm sure some of you have had it in your garden, maybe still have it. This is the picture. This is the plant pornography that came out trying to market it. And it looks pretty much like that when you buy it in the garden center. So I planted it and put it in, and it had some pretty good flowering some years, but some years not. And by the 5th year, when I got no flowers at all that year, you get 2 flowers one year, you get 6 the next, 1 next year, 3 the next. 5th year, no flowers. Forget it. I dug it up, gave it to my neighbor. He could plant it fine. I think he still got it in his yard. And I decided to go with something else that wouldn't disappoint me so much. The thing is you could still have that same kind of problem with Bloomstruck here. Bloomstruck's actually even a little, I don't know if it's a little tougher to grow. They're not a sure thing. So Endless Summer, Bloomstruck. They can be pretty good macrophylla hydrangeas, big leaf hydrangeas. They're probably the two of the most successful out here, but we are just not always reliable with them. The thing is, they'll continue to sell because they look so fabulous at the garden centers, and they sometimes perform for us here, just not reliably. Now, selling even bigger would be this one called Summer Crush, which is supposed to be even more colorful, and it's a huge, huge seller. Again, I'm not convinced that I know it's going to flower enough for me. Certainly worth a try. You can certainly try throwing it in the ground, but I think other stuff might be a little more reliable. The Summer Crush is truly impressive though in flower. If you want to get reliable, white flowering Annabelle hydrangea. And this is growing in practically real heavy shade. And it's actually performing pretty good for something in real heavy shade. Most other shrubs would look terrible in this situation. So Annabelle hydrangea, the old-fashioned favorite, is still one of the best. Now, the thing is, oh, I love those blues. I love those pinks. Let's get pink flowers. Let's get blue flowers. What are we going to do about that? Oh, go to Chicago, the Chicago Arboretum a couple of years ago, and you say, what? A pink Annabelle hydrangea? Invincible Spirit, hydrangea arborescens, Invincible Spirit. Must be coolest thing around. Well, let's find out. Well, they don't look too terrible. This is the ones in our trial. Bella Anna was on the right, and Invincible Spirit was on the left there. Not too bad, huh? Maybe we got a pink Annabelle. And look at the again, plant pornography. Although you start looking at that picture, do you think that girl maybe she's only 4 foot tall. So the flower looks that much bigger. Maybe if she does not let go of that one stem there, if she lets go of that thing, that stem looks so thin, maybe those flowers are just going to fall right on over. I don't know. Looks like plant pornography to me. Let's see real life. Oh, that's what it looks in real life. Well, it's not ugly, but it sure isn't like the pictures. But you know what? That's not too terrible bad. That's not too bad. No, that's not bad at all. It's not an Annabelle, but that shows pretty good. That I do like this hydrangea arborescens Invincible Spirit. One of the troubles though, is by late August, an Annabelle hydrangea is still beautifully white and is starting to turn that little appley green, that little bit of greenish, beautiful fall color that you get on it. Whereas these Invincible Spirit hydrangea, they're just turning color to brown. They're not really showing very well. So the flowers don't last as long. They're not as big. They're not as showy. The plant's not as dense and tight. The plant isn't as dense and tight. The plant leaves aren't quite as nice and attractive. So it's different than Annabelle, but it's pretty good, but it's something different. There's a new one on the market now I have not grown yet. It's called Invincible Spirit 2. It's supposed to be a little better than the first. I would certainly be willing to plant that. Because this thing throws flowers on the new wood of the year, it's totally reliable in flowering. Unlike Summer Crush, Bloomstruck, or Endless Summer. Unlike those flower on last year's buds, so they have to overwinter their flower buds. But Invincible Spirit, Annabelle, they all flower on the new wood of the year, so you're assured of getting flowers every year. Now, what if we could get even better Annabelle types with more color? A couple years ago, Proven Winners came out with these new ones. Invincible Ruby is one. Limetta, which is supposed to be real small. Wee White, which is only supposed to be 15 inches tall. And Mini Mauvette, which again, quite small, 2-footers. Man, they look pretty good. Guess what, folks? After talking to people in the industry, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to call plant pornography again. They're just, so far as we can tell up north here, they're not very strong growers. They're all labeled as smaller, so maybe they just don't have as much vigor. Maybe down south they do a little better, but after 2 years of growing them, one of the largest growers in the north, Bailey Nurseries, has quit trying to grow them. They're not growing them under contract anymore because they just do not perform for us up here. We'll keep our eyes open and hopefully we get some good new hydrangeas soon. But right now I cannot recommend necessarily this new Invincible Spirits. series. However, Limelight, one of the greatest plant introductions the last 30 years. The panicle hydrangeas are fabulous as a group. They've gotten much better, maybe sort of starting with Limelight, although there was stuff before then that was great too. They've bred now for better looking flowers, tighter plant habit, fuller plant habit. And these are big shrubs for the most part. The smallest of the panicle hydrangeas will still get to about 5 or 6 foot, 5 foot probably. Limelight will go 8 or 9 foot, but really, really a long flowering season and just keeps showing well, even into fall. Even into fall. Quickfire is probably one of the is a little smaller than Limelight. And it's truly quickfire because whereas Limelight and other panicle hydrangeas start coloring up in August, not coloring up, start flowering. This will flower early in July. And by the middle of August has already turned that nice red color, that pink and red color that we usually get in the fall on panicle hydrangeas. So it's just a longer season of bloom, a longer season of color. We get 3 good months of flowering out of this plant. Pinky Winky, another good one, pretty big, bigger than Quickfire. Sort of a two-tone where the top of the flower is pure white and the bottom of the flower is quite a lovely rich pink. So here we go. Yeah, a little bit looser in texture, nice dark flower stems. Strawberry Vanilla. When this first came out, I got a picture from one of my plant friends at Bailey Nursery. She sent me that picture. That's this picture on the right here. Now I saw those flowers and oh my God, are those flowers impressive. They're so fully doubled and they have that beautiful, beautiful pinks to them. But I saw this first picture and I thought, what is this? All the flowers except for that one white one in the middle are all flopped down. Is this plant trying to give me the finger? Well, no, not really. We grew it in our plant trials and it flopped a little the first year or so, but after that, it held up its flowers extremely well. And I've got no problems with plant flopping on this sucker at all. Strawberry Vanilla is a heck of a panicle hydrangea. One of my favorites. That and Limelight. Here it's showing actually a little bit of, it's late in the season. It's actually bending down just a little bit, but that's as much as I saw. And that's a young plant. That'll get better and better. Again, showing just a little bit late fall. Still showing some good color. Zinfandel is supposed to be like strawberry vanilla. I don't know the plant. I've seen it in catalogs. Strawberry Sunday is supposed to be a little smaller version of a panicle hydrangea of vanilla strawberry. Again, I've seen it in pots. It looks pretty good. Probably a 2 to 3 footer. Little Lime is another nice small, like a smaller version of come on, lime, of the big panicle hydrangeas. Although of all the small panicle hydrangeas I've seen, my favorite is Bobo. Incredibly floriferous, maybe going to about 3 foot eventually, but it just flowers and you can't hardly see the leaves on this sucker. It's just flowers so heavily. Big fan of Bobo. Okay, let's get to yet another species of hydrangea. The hydrangeas give us so much in shade tolerance and so much in plant beauty. Snow Queen's been around for quite a while. It's one of the more hardy of the oak-leaf hydrangeas. They weren't always thought of being hardy around here because they set their flowers on last year's wood and they don't always overwinter those flower buds successfully. However, they commonly do. And even if they weren't to flower, that beautiful texture of those big oak leaf leaves, the great, great fall color that you see on this plant. And I'd say, but the textural quality of the leaves and the fall color alone would be worth growing it. Snow Queen goes about 6 foot. There's another smaller one called Peewee, not quite as flower bud hardy. That'll go to about 3 or 4 foot. Now, if you were to cross these two, though, you'd end up with this one, Ruby Slivers. USDA released this a couple years ago. I don't have a lot of experience with it. We put one in the ground at the gardens at Burger Botanical, and it's doing well right now. But this picture makes me want to grow this plant. It's not supposed to get as big as Snow Queen, 4 to 5 footer, but that's some pretty impressive flower panicles on it. There's another one now called Munchkin. It's supposed to be a little smaller. Did not look as good in the pictures. Ruby Slippers is the one I'd plant, but hey, I'd plant them both. Why not? Not one last species, is yet another species of hydrangea. These are going to be sort of hard to find, but hydrangea serrata or mountain hydrangea. This is just it's sort of an understated hydrangea. This will take more shade than most other hydrangeas. It'll take as much shade as an Annabelle. This is in heavy shade right here, a fairly heavy shade in my yard back in Janesville. And the flowers are not overwhelming. They're sort of small and open, sort of lace cap flowers. But in 20 years of growing this plant, I have always gotten flowers. They've always overwintered the flower buds, and the flowers have always come back. Then most falls, you get nice fall color. It's not crazy good fall color, but understated and beautiful. This is a plant that'll slowly increase in size and from a clump increase by gradually spreading out. I've got a 10-year-old clump in my yard right now that is about 3 foot tall and about 5 feet wide. Great plant to share because you can just dig some roots out of the ground and give them to your neighbor or your friends. Hard to find, though. I had to get this mail order. I think they should be growing them more often. People don't realize that hydrangea serrata is as flower bud hardy as it is. And mine, at least, has flowered every year for me in 20 years. Japanese Caria, not always easy plant to cite, but it takes shade like nobody's business. It's sort of ungainly. Lots of stems right from the base will gradually spread out and fill an area. I think one of the most ornamental aspects to it, does yellow flowers in the spring, certainly, yellow fall color on it, certainly, but I think the single most prominent ornamental aspect is the green stems. The stems are slender green stems. They stay green all winter, much like red twig dogwood gives you ornamentation. So this is very interesting for the winter landscape. That would be my main reason for putting in. It's a little crazy grower. It's not always the best kept plant, but a little pruner will keep it in shape too. Dr. Michael Durr, some of you might have heard from him. He is Mr. Plants, Mr. Woody Plants. He wrote the Manual of Woody Landscape Plants, which is like the plant Bible. And he says, just about anything is better than Physocarpus. Thanks, Mike. Summer wine. It's probably my favorite of the larger 9-barks or Physocarpus. There's a bunch of purple Physocarpus in the market. Diablo is the first. Diablo is still a very good hedging plant, but it's a little too crazy growing for me. Summer wine, 8 foot, 9 foot, that kind of size, little better plant. It's more resistant to powdery mildew, which can be a big problem on these 9-barks. Some individual varieties tend to get more than others. Little Devil, when it came out, I said, oh, this is the 9-bark that everybody should grow. It's really sort of dwarfish, upright, hard to find those kind of things in a plant. And it was totally resistant to powdery mildew until about 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's starting to get powdery mildew like nobody's business. I'd keep my powder dry on this one for now. This is showing it. Do we have a picture of it with powdery mildew? No. But it's just such a beautiful plant if it doesn't get the powdery mildew. But like I say, I'm worried now that powdery mildew has caught up to this plant. Tiny Wine is a competing one, sold by Proven Winners. I've never grown it, but it's quite widely available. Don't know it very well. And what this picture is doing in here, I have no idea, because I would not put any spirea, well, maybe Van Hoot spirea, into a shady condition. This slide got in here because I love it so much. Sorry, it's not part of the talk. But false spirea, aha, that's another one that can take heavy, heavy shade. More thought of as a large scale ground cover because it's quite aggressive, quite huge, sort of looks like a woody astilbe on steroids, maybe. This is about 8 foot tall here, and it will sucker very, very readily and fill an area, as big an area as you got. Just give it some time, plant it, step back. You can hack to the ground every couple of years if you want to just have it fill in tighter and lower. But this is non-pruned. This is something that has not been pruned for 5 years. So for the right situation, not a bad plant. Semsorbaria, much smaller, super showy in the spring, but it will still spread. It'll go about 3 foot in height. I think it's worth growing in a landscape, but keep in mind, you might have to get the shovel out as it starts widening out. Maybe putting it somewhere where it's contained by concrete. If you had so the sidewalk can keep it from spreading. It might be. I've seen it used very effectively in planting islands in parking lots. Situation like that might be nice. That reddish fall color and gold fall color only lasts for about a month in the spring, but it's quite showy during that month. And here it shows it. Needs back a little, get a little twig die back on it on occasion. Sometimes you want to just shear these suckers to the ground. They fill out again real quick. Cut leaf Stephanandra, super, super, tolerant of shade. I don't have a picture of in real heavy shade, no. But cut leaf Stephanandra, use it as like a slow hedging, a facer plant. It's pretty low arching plant. Not always super well behaved, but it's, you know, it's fine texture and it works in the right place. Takes a lot of shade really well. Oh, here we go. Missouri Botanic on a shady walkway. That's a very nice look, very nice use of it there, filling in this area. Okay, Blue Muffin. Oh, it says 6x6, dense and compact. Looks good. Maybe we should be planting more of this Blue Muffin. 6x6. Well, hey, Blue Muffin. My friend Glenn Harold, I think he's 6'5". He's a tall guy. He's a really tall guy. Blue Muffin is less compact than Glenn Harold. And guess what? We used to really recommend arrowwood viburnums for shady situations. Guess what? We can't recommend them anymore because there's something called viburnum borer that has gotten into viburnums around here, and certain viburnums, it hits really hard. It is really bad on arrowwood viburnums for that reason, until we know exactly how it's going to shake out here. By the way, this viburnum beetle has only just gotten to Milwaukee in the last 2-3 years. So we're just learning how to deal with it right now. It seems like arrowwood viburnum seems to be very susceptible, and that's where we're seeing the damage. However, Korean spice viburnum, my favorite fragrance among all shrubs in the whole world. Again, this is underneath another big box elder in my place in Janesville. Beautiful and full. This thing had such great fragrance that wasn't my next door neighbors. It was the neighbor next to them once commented on, what is that beautiful shrub? What's the beautiful smell coming from your yard? They could smell it 2 houses away in a city neighborhood. But Korean spice viburnum does not tend to have any problems from viburnum leaf beetle. Viburnum leaf beetle tends to attack viburnums that have smoother leaves, not real wrinkly and heavy leaves. And Korean spice viburnum has quite a wrinkly, heavy leaf. Okay, straight species is just fine. This variety called sugar and spice, that picture compared against straight species, notice how it's much denser and tighter in flowers, and it's a lot more stems to it. It just forms up a lot better. It flowers better too. This sugar and spice for a compact Carlesii viburnum is the best one out there right now. And of the bigger ones, I think one of the best varieties out there, straight species is just fine. Spice Island is another really good one. Spice Ball is another dwarfy one that came out through Proven Winners, widely available in a lot of garden centers. I don't know the plant. The pictures look good. I've never grown that particular plant. One other kind of viburnum that will grow around here is Viburnum seboldii. This is a one called Ironclad, not easy to find. Sebold viburnum is another one with the rugose, wrinkly, heavy leaves. That's another one that is very resistant to viburnum borer, and it's going to get more popular because it is resistant. And Sebold viburnum has those great red berries on it. Also, the pedicels, the red pedicels actually hold up nice. So it's that heavy, heavy leaf, beautiful red berries, red pedicels, big plant that gets 10 to 12 foot tall. Double file viburnum is yet another viburnum that does not have problems with viburnum leaf borer. And people used to be shy about planting them. It's one of the prettiest viburnums, but we didn't used to think of them as being hardy enough for us down here. I'd be willing to give it a try. Maybe we might kill them off once or twice. I had a Newport double file viburnum for many years when I lived in Janesville. That lasted 10 years and I moved away. It was still alive. So maybe these viburnum plicatums, double file, would be worth planting. Snow and Summer, by the way, is a variety that flowers pretty much all summer long. I've seen that in southern Michigan, does very well there. I think it would have a decent chance around here. So those are some of the viburnums we should start thinking about. I'd stay away from arrowwood. I'd stay away from nannyberry. I'd stay away from high bush cranberry. That's one of the very most susceptible. Black haw viburnum I'd stay away from. So the list is sort of short. Let's see how this shakes out. But again, it's Korean spice viburnum, Judd viburnum, Sieboldii viburnum, leatherleaf viburnum. Those are all still pretty good. Double file viburnum. Those would be pretty good viburnums. Yews, sort of boring for a lot of us, but you know what? They grow. They want to be big trees. They want to live and get huge, but they take pruning so incredibly well. You can keep them to size for a long time. Taxus media is the lower spreading types. Taxus capitata are the taller, more Christmas tree styled ones. And there's some name varieties. In a general way, they're super handy because they'll take a lot of shade and they'll take a lot of pruning. And we don't tend to have a lot of disease problems with them. Well, some people find them sort of boring, but they do very well, and especially in a formal situation. Although they look pretty good, not pruned formally as well. This variety, I believe, is taunt. Nope. Oh no, we've got a problem, folks. If you're not putting in yews, you might be putting in boxwood. And this terrible picture here is a picture of the big problem that's hitting us now in boxwood. Boxwood blight has just made it to Wisconsin in the last couple of years. Now, we never had this problem before. It's a problem out east. But there are a couple of kinds. The most resistant boxwood that we know of to boxwood blight is wintergreen boxwood. Now, it's also, the species is Seneca variety insularis. It has the smallest leaves and probably the worst winter color of any boxwood, but it does not get chewed up. I mean, it does not get diseased by boxwood blight very bad. It's also one of the cold hardiest boxwoods around here. So that one gets coming up on the list now. It's not as pretty as some of the other ones, not as pretty as green gem. Green gem, green velvet, green mountain, green Chicagoland green. Those are all very similar. Those are hybrids. All of those are thought of as being moderately susceptible. So hopefully green gem shows up, will be good. We still don't know because we haven't really seen how boxwood, we haven't had enough experience with boxwood blight in Wisconsin yet. So when you go to different areas, it affects plants differently. Looking at the Cornell data right now, Cornell is a little bit like Wisconsin in terms of climate. They said on their study, they thought wintergreen was the best one up there. They had some problems with the green velvet and the Chicagoland greens, but not as much as with the other boxwoods up there. So, and here's a Chicagoland green in my front yard back in Janesville. So I think we're at least, it's a brave new world with boxwoods. We just don't know how bad it's going to be. If you're real worried about it, though, this wintergreen is the safest way to go. We think that maybe these other ones are probably going to be okay, though. Chamaecyparis. Now, I don't have it written on the handout. It's not super shade tolerant, but the green, I've seen this big green old one. I saw this in a real shady location. It was doing just fine. It doesn't really show up necessarily as listed in the shady ones, but I think Chamaecyparis, both threadleaf Chamaecyparis, which is Piscifera, and other Chamaecyparis, even if hardiness is sometimes a problem, but they actually, they will take the shade pretty well. Dwarf Alberta spruce, Picea glauca conica. It's actually just a variety of white spruce that happens to be a dwarf. That does very well in the shade as well. I think partially just because it's so dense, so naturally dense. And we've got a weeping hemlock right in front of it. That's another shade. You can see when they're planted with hosses, you got evergreens that'll take the shade. Canadian hemlock. That is, if you're going to put a larger evergreen in that'll take some shade, that is the one that'll take shade. Far more than spruce, far more than arborvitae. Some people feel that arborvitae are real shade tolerant. They'll take some shade, but not that much. Canadian hemlock is the real stuff that'll take a lot of shade well. And here we have it as just growing as a tree. But then they have all these dwarf, and they're really great garden subjects. Gench white, Jetalo, Cole's prostrate. There's a lot of different forms that we can get these hemlocks in, and that's part of the stuff I love in my garden. Although some stuff, there can be too much shade. Excuse me for the folks. Here in my garden in Janesville, I had beehive in, just too much shade, and it just did not perform worth a darn for me there. One last evergreen does great, great, great in the shade. Juniper does lousy in the shade, but something called Russian cypress or microbiota does fabulous in the shade. And it's a softer texture than juniper. I think it's one of the prettiest evergreen ground covers there is. In most cases, it's a better look, I think, than juniper. Two things about it, though. One is it is absolutely intolerant of poor drainage. When I was working at the garden center years ago, I used to take more returns on this than just about anything else because people would put it in, it would get overwatered, and it would die. So if you got real good drainage, it's a great plant. Oh, we don't have the other thing about it is it's got sort of they euphemistically called plum color in the winter. I think it looks a little muddy in the winter. Some people like the color. It sort of turns a little purple brownish in the winter. Okay, let's get into trees for a little bit. When I said on my handout, are you feeling lucky? It's because you see a lot of Japanese maples around. You hardly ever see a lot of 30, 40-year-old Japanese maples around. You see some decent sized ones, but sooner or later, unless you got just the right location, the winter tends to get them sooner or later. Sometimes it's a verticillium that gets us. The hardiest of any of the Japanese maples that I know of is this one called Emperor One. It's a purple leaf. It's also known as Emperor sometimes. And here is the one at Allen Centennial Gardens, still going strong. This picture's about 10 years old. So it's a beautiful form and hardy. It's the hardiest, I think. I think it leaves out a little bit later is one of the reasons it tends to be a little hardier than other Jap maples. If you want to plant something that's not a Japanese maple, though, it says Acer japanum. No, that's not Acer. That's actually a full moon maple. Acer, excuse me. Come on. Acer palmatum is Japanese maple. Acer japonicum is full moon maple. Aconita folium is quite hardy around here. I've seen that hold up really well. And it's got some of the best fall color I've seen on any Asian maple at all. This is sort of like a Japanese maple with an extra sweater on. And again, that fall color is pretty freaking spectacular. But now there's a new batch of plants that have hit the market in the last 5-10 years that are a cross between Korean maple, Acer pseudocybolianum, and Japanese maple. This one called Hasselkiss that comes from the dean of Wisconsin horticulture, Professor Hasselkiss at UW-Madison. That starts out green, but it has really nice fall color, totally 100% hardy. Excuse me. Totally hardy in Wisconsin. Been growing here for 30 years, no problems at all. I think this is the original plant at the Arboretum in Madison. Green leaves, red new growth, and then got great fall color. Here's the one I put in at a couple of years old at Botanical Gardens. Northwind is another one of these crosses, Korean cross with Japanese maple, and it's supposed to be a little more vigorous. This is out of Isley Nursery, and that picture of that plant's probably about 15, 20 foot tall. Red new growth, red fall color. Arctic Jade is green green growth, and then again red fall color. All of these would be totally hardy in Wisconsin, unlike Japanese maple. Three-flowered Acer, Acer triflorum. There's these Asian maples that are smaller maples. They're quite shade tolerant, and they're beautiful. Three-flowered maple is great red fall color, cool peeling bark, interesting texturally. So it's a great winter look. It's a great spring, summer to fall look. And here again, beautiful with the leaves just coming out in the spring and that peely bark. By the way, much more hardy than paperbark maple. Paperbark maple is a little iffy for around here. Serviceberry, much hardier than the Asian maples. And that's one that, again, takes shade well. 3-season plant with flowers, with fruit, with fall color. There's one fall color. One that particularly strikes me, interestingly, though, because of the form is obelisk, which is actually Amelanchier alnifolia. And it's quite upright. It doesn't have red fall color. It has yellow fall color, but nice clear yellow fall color. But this very nice dense form you don't get out of many other plants, especially deciduous plants. So I'm a big fan of this stuff. Carpinus caroliniana, American hornbeam. That's a native around here, and that's quite shade tolerant. grows as clumps, and the bark is what really shows this off. Beautiful sinewy bark on those plants. The fall color is usually yellow, but there's been some new varieties coming out. This JN seed strain that most of the West Coast guys are growing now. It came out of Wisconsin. Came out of Wisconsin breeding program. Very consistent red fall color, both of those as a multi-stem and as a tree form. And here it is with Mike Annie. Mike Annie's released a variety that's very upright called. So those are the Carpinus to be planting these days. Carpinus Firespire and Carpinus JN strain coming out of Johnson's nursery. One last tree I'm going to talk about just a wee bit would be Pagoda Dogwood, which has gotten out of planting. And I used to love this plant so much, but there's so many dead ones around. You see with this golden canker that has killed them off. A lot of people aren't even carrying it anymore. I have found that as long as you have good drainage, the canker problem is not that big of a deal. And that beautiful, beautiful architectural form, that horizontal branching, the red fall color, the white flowers. This is a great plant if you get it in the right location. The architectural form is the single biggest thing. And for the plant collectors among us, Golden Shadows has this super, super beautiful variegated foliage. And then here's Golden Shadows, again, showing that nice tiering, that horizontal tiering you see in Pagoda Dogwood. And then Gold Bullion, Pagoda Dogwood. Neither of these are easy to grow, but keep in mind, the more plants you kill, the better gardener you become. So that would be a good test for you. One last plant now, shade trees are not shade tolerant because they have to outgrow everything else, except for maybe sugar maples. You ever go into a sugar maple forest? You see all these thousands of little tiny seedling sugar maples on the ground. They might stay tiny for years. They're just waiting for their chance, but they can tolerate that shade because when a tree comes down, they get sun, all of a sudden they pop up and grow huge. Well, so sugar maple as a shade tree will take more shade than just about anything as a shade tree. So if you want to plant it now and then cut down that other tree later and let it pop up, go for it. But if you're going to plant a sugar maple, Fall Fiesta, the best one on the market now. It's a Bailey Nursery introduction, better fall color, good leafing, more vigorous than most other sugar maples. So if you're going to get a sugar maple, get Fall Fiesta, that great, great leaf. So keep in mind, I'm retired, but keep in mind, Burner Botanical Gardens is just a hop, skip, and a jump away. And they got a lot more than just hostas. So thank you very much. I'd be happy to take your questions. Hello?
If anyone has questions, you've all been muted, so you'll need to unmute yourself before
Well, for those of you who've been keeping track, I counted 4 H plants: honeysuckle, hydrangea, hosta, and hemlock.
Well, I tell you, the reason I said H plants is I actually have a talk called Alex, I'll have shade plants that start with H for $500. We played Jeopardy with that. That's the category. Shade plants that start with H. Hellebore, heuchera, hosta, horny goatweed. Those are some of those plants that I like with the H in the name. Just saying.
I had a question. So,
yes.
I'm like the casual gardener, and I go to like Stein Garden Centers and Bayside Garden Centers, and they don't have any of these names there. And they only have, it's sort of like take it or leave it. Here's this variety of this plant. And so I guess, where do you find all these things? And
okay, yeah,
what's the
actually,
process
a lot of this name stuff actually would be available at garden centers, but I do put some varieties in there that aren't necessarily real easy to find. Most of the stuff here you could find at a garden center like a Johnson's Nursery or a come on, what's that place up on Good Hope off of 76th Street? Miners. They might not have all the varieties. Like something like a Rudy Haig boxwood might be sort of hard to find, but I think actually Johnson's does carry Rudy Haig. Aesculus parviflora might be hard to find in a lot of them. But, I think neon burst dogwood or black chokeberry or a lot of those hydrangeas
They have.
would be available at Stein's. A lot of them would be available at Stein's.
Okay.
You do have to look around a little more. There's a couple on here that are almost you'd have to look hard to find, but just a couple. I can think of like the viburnum sargentii. You'd have to look around for, maybe, the hydrangea, the hydrangea serrata, mountain hydrangea. That I don't think you could find around here, except you might have to go mail order. But most of them, look around. I think Johnson's is the best garden center around here. I think Miners is a good garden center, real good garden center too. Stein's is not bad. Stein's is not bad.
Now that you talked up the Korean spice viburnum, I'm dying to figure out where you get them.
Yeah, they have them at Stein's. They definitely have them at Stein's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the straight species is a great plant.
For the, so I purchased a Golden Shadows. All I could find was a liner from Proven
Sure.
Winners of the
Sure.
of the Golden Shadows dogwood.
Yes.
Because I haven't been able to find it in a more mature offering.
I tell you, that plant I know pretty well. It's a hard plant to grow. The best ones I've
Okay.
ever seen, I've seen two really good ones in my life, and I've seen about a half dozen sort of bad ones. The best two, both of them were in a space where they got good, strong afternoon sun. I'm sorry. One had good morning sun, one had good afternoon sun, but neither one had all day sun. Both of them had about a half day of shade, and both of them had really good drainage. And again,
Okay.
I think those are two things. Don't have it
I have it.
full sun, and make sure your drainage is good.
Okay, yeah, I have it between our house and the house next door.
Yeah.
Like a woodland garden sort of setup. And I've actually thought about potting it up in a large container to see how it does in that situation.
You know what? That I could see trying it, and it might grow a little faster because you could supply fertilizer and water to it better. Yeah.
Okay.
But again, this was one that a friend of mine, she just threw in the garden, and it just happened to be in a happy place. And this plant, I've seen it since then. It's probably 15 feet tall, 15 feet wide now. So
Okay.
they will grow. They just got to get lucky.
Okay, I'm told that Moira Fitzgerald has a question. If
Hi, I do, Alec. Thank you.
Sure.
Can you just talk a little bit more about the hemlocks quickly?
Oh, sure.
You were so fast and they are really exciting to me. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I'm a huge fan of hemlocks because of these garden hemlocks that exist out there. Species hemlock is a shade tree. I mean, is a big tree, and you could put it in as an evergreen, and it's fine to use as an evergreen. But the real, I think, interesting things are like, for instance, the weeping hemlock, Sargent weeping hemlock is just a beautiful, beautiful plant, and they're not cheap, and you have to look for them. But it's a plant that'll maybe only be 6 feet tall, 8 feet wide in 30 years, but with such incredible form and beauty to them. So many of these hemlocks, they have sort of a weeping character, and you get. I have about 15 hemlocks on my little tiny city property, and I've got ones that are very upright. I've got stuff real low and creepy, big weeping ones, little weeping ones. There's just so much variety in these different, what I call garden hemlocks. And again, that's something you actually have to look around for. You have to go, again, a garden center like Johnson's would have a decent supply, but a lot of that stuff now is mail order. People buy that stuff from Oregon by mail now a lot of times too. So any other particular specific things about hemlocks though?
Was there one called a velvet?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay.
There's a
Yeah.
green velvet boxwood.
Okay, no, there was one or two hemlocks that you mentioned, and I was trying to write down them
Oh.
quickly as you said them. They looked really interesting to me.
I think you said Canadian hemlock.
Okay, Canadian hemlock is the species. And that's this big, this is growing as a tree right there in somebody's yard in Janesville. And so that's how they look, and they take shade very, very well. But this was in my backyard, and it's sort of a mounding one called Gench White that has white tips. The new growth is white. So it's quite showy. And again, this is in full shade, in a hosta garden. And then there's a bunch of these sort of weeping ones. This one called Jetalo has these sort of nestled, rounded bird's nest looks to it. And I call it, I don't call it a weeping juniper. I call it more of a bird's nest hemlock. I'm sorry, not juniper. So Jetalo, and this is in my yard too. Cole's prostrate, which is a fairly low growing weeper. It'll spread out and, maybe be wider than it is tall. So those are all, there's one called Sargent, that's a weeping hemlock that's quite upright, especially if you stake it. So you'll maybe stake it to 8 or 9 feet, and then it'll gradually come down, weep down from that. So there's all these different architectural forms. Does that help a little bit?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Certainly. And I just get online and start looking at different cultivars or go to garden centers and start looking at the stuff there. I adore hemlock because I have a shady backyard. I do a hosta. And so I can put hemlocks. I put my dwarf conifers, which I love, right next to my hostas, which I love.
So you were talking about ordering different things from online. Are there any particular vendors that you like online that you order from?
No, I do not buy a lot online. I used to work for Song Sparrow Perennial, so I don't. No, I don't. There are no particular ones. For peonies, yes. For peonies, Solaris Farms in Wisconsin, they do mail order, and the kind of peonies I collect, I could only get through mail order. So Solaris Farms is a big one for me. I otherwise don't do a lot of mail order on stuff like that. But it's the internet's a big place, and it's possible to find this stuff through the internet that way. The trouble with mail order is so often these plants are quite small, but that's where you can get some of these plants where you can't get them anywhere else. One I will give a plug extra to a friend of mine, Botanophilia, Nick Turnus, and it's I don't know how to spell it, but he's a guy from northern Wisconsin, but he's more of a collector's kind of guy. He might have a couple of these hemlocks, but he does more collectors perennials. But you didn't ask to bring up that is actually a mail order place that I have gone to quite often, Botanophilia, for crazy collectible stuff.
Botanophilia?
Botanophilia, BOTANPHILLA or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Would you be willing to share your email in the chat, and then people might have think of questions, could
I'm okay
contact-
with that. I can't promise you I'm going to answer you right away,
Yeah,
but yeah, sure.
okay.
My email, if anybody wants to write it down, is DWANNINGER@gmail.com. Sort of nice to have a unusual name that when you can get a gmail.com without having to add, digits and letters.
So I'll pop up another question.
Sure.
Those of us with the 5-year endless summer hydrangea that are a beautiful green source of leaves, what else can you do with them? Are there tricks to make them flower?
I have tried different things. And I have seen people who've had pretty good luck with them. And it might be a location situation, a microclimate kind of thing. I have tried winter protection, and, I tried hay one year. I tried a bushel basket another year. Neither one of them seemed to help that much. I think what happens is the major problem is spring frosts. The buds will start coming out of dormancy, and then we'll get a frost. I'm talking about like March, and like this time of the year, like March and April frosts. And I think they just hit them early. So maybe if you winter protected them, I don't know. If you could insulate them and keep from warming up. But I've tried different stuff, and it's never really worked. Nothing's ever really worked for me. But I have seen beautiful ones in people's yards. It's just go figure. Yeah.
Huh. Let's see. I'm just trying to think if I don't know, does anyone else have a question at this time? We just one last thing.
Sure.
Before our Zoom started, we started talking about how the zones keep moving up and the bugs keep changing over the course of the years. So what are some examples of things that don't make sense to grow anymore and do make sense to grow now that, given 5-10 years have happened in climate change?
I tell you, in a real general way, again, we have to stop using as many viburnums because of that viburnum leaf beetle. It's a huge deal. I think because of climate change, not because of climate change, because of breeding, and a little bit because of climate change, a lot of the hydrangeas are getting to be more, and then also things like rose. This is a shady plant talk, but so a sunny plant, but like some of the roses of Sharon are getting more popular. That plant didn't used to be quite hardy enough to be reliable here, and it's pretty reliable these days. So, shrub Althea, Rose of Sharon, there's some really cool varieties coming out with that stuff. So, but I think that there's so much work in hydrangeas nowadays. And to be honest, pretty much all these woody plant varieties, there's new varieties coming out all the time, and we're doing pretty good of trying to get resistance to diseases, resistance to insects. And so I think we're in better shape now in terms of plant selection than we have been for a long time.
This is not woody plants, but any comment about roses?
Yeah, my comment about roses is the world has totally changed. 25 years ago, people were still planting hybrid tea types, grandifloras, polyanthas, things like that. And that has almost totally disappeared. People do not want to spray insecticides and pesticides and fungicides anymore. And so the rose world has pretty much all gone to shrub roses, landscape roses. And there's a ton of good ones out there. Bill Radler, who is the retired head of the Botanical Gardens, he came out with Knockout 15 years ago, which is maybe the best rose introduction ever. And pretty much everything that he's released, which is lots and lots of roses, are excellent, excellent roses. So we're seeing roses that you don't have to use a lot of chemicals on. People don't want to have to use chemicals. We have totally gone to basically almost an organic footprint at Bernard Botanical Gardens. And we pulled out a lot of those hybrid teas and grandifloras, and we've gone to just shrub roses now because that's where the world is with roses. Is that what you were talking about, sort of?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's big change. It's been coming on for 30 years, but it's pretty much a universal change now. Almost nobody's growing hybrid teas anymore. And all the big companies that used to sell them are all going out of business.
Right, and they're beautiful to look at, but unfortunately, it seems like we're losing the smell.
Oh, the nice thing is some of these shrub roses, they're doing a better job now of getting the smell back. Not everything, but a lot. And the first series of knockouts didn't have any good smell to them, but we are starting to see some decent fragrances coming out of some of the roses now.
That's good.
Yeah,
One of the things
yeah,
that was
because
nice
people
about
like
the
you
teas.
complained. People like you complained, and the breeders started saying, "Oh, that's important. That's important." So, no, it's a pleasure talking to you guys. It's a weird format. It's hard to get the feedback, but I think things are okay.
Oh, no, that was great. Thank you so much, Dave.
Sure.
A lot of fun. Hope to have you again, maybe next year or the following year. It'd be
Yep.
fun to catch up on what's changed.
Sounds very good. Yep.
So again, I'd like to thank Dave. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Angela Westmore and Susan Strecker. I'd like to invite everybody to join us next week for a talk by Diane Jones-Allen about creating sustainable, community-focused open space at varying urban scales. That's kind of a mouthful, but in short, I think it's about urban gardens. So that should be a very interesting talk, and hope everybody can join us then. So
Cool.
thank you again,
Thank you.
everybody. Thanks for
Thank
attending,
you.
and good
Okay,
night.
we'll be seeing you. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good night.
Thanks. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.